Yeah, now it's recording.
Hello everyone. My name is Paul Kern. I'm the owner of 122 Stainback Court in Red Oak. Essentially, since I moved to Red Oak in this address in 2007, I heard a lot of things about Chris. Chris is my neighbor and lives right to the north of me. A lot of people on this street like to talk about Chris, and I was under the impression maybe that Chris could learn a lesson or two. I don't know. And the more I got to learn about Chris is a good family man. He's a good community person that helps out. Anytime that I leave my garage door open, Chris calls me. Anytime that there's something going on in my house that I would deem important. Uh-oh. Did it stop?
She can stop.
You know what you ought to let me do? You ought to let me go do this video in the backyard like I do all my
No,
videos.
it's still recording. It's just a screen went
I'll
off.
just send it to you.
Yeah, still going.
Alright, so we're here.
Yeah.
I remember one time one of my grandchildren drank something in the backyard. Chris ended up calling the authorities to get them out there to make sure that my grandson was okay. So one of the things that I was watching in a video when Dean was talking to the police, and Dean told them that I had sued Chris in order to get a fence put up between our properties because of the dogs. What actually happened there was the city sent out an invite to a city council meeting because Chris was requesting to have a full-time kennel put at his house. We went to the meeting, and the people on the council asked me, well, what would it take for me to be agreeable to have Chris have a kennel there? And I said, well, if Chris put a fence up, that'd go a long way, because dogs get to be loud when you have more than one or two. And you know, they asked me if I would be willing to pay for it, and I said, nah, not so much. So Chris put a fence up all by himself, paid for it, never said another word about it. And the whole dog situation's kind of gone away. I don't remember the year. It was a few years ago. I was looking to rent my house and reached out to a family friend that one of my children had gone to school with. I'm not going to say any names, but she went ahead and rented the house, and she had a boyfriend, and she said, was it okay to have the boyfriend move in? What I didn't know was the boyfriend didn't work, and the boyfriend hung around the house all the time, kind of doing weird stuff. The way it all ended up with Dean was I asked her to move him out of the house because of all the stuff that he was doing, basically to the neighbors. And as soon as he moved out, and he just kept sneaking around and this and that, and I just told her, I said, you know, maybe it's best that you move too. And she ended up moving out because of all this stuff. And Chris and I have had an agreement for a long time about his access to my property, go down the property line on my property on the north side, so he can either mow the fence or access behind his property, and eventually he put a gate up on the back of the property so he could get back there. Don't really care what he's doing. He asked me, I gave him permission. When Dean moved in, I told Dean about the permission that Chris had from me to access the yard, and I asked him, if you want, I will withdraw this agreement from Chris, and we can just go on. Oh, Dean said, no, I would never ask you to forego an agreement between you and someone else, Mr. Kern. And so he kept this agreement in place with an understanding that he was going to treat Chris like I treated Chris, with an agreement that I had. And I don't think I don't really think it ended up being like that. There was a day, and I'm not sure the details, but Dean had pulled a vehicle he was trying to sell into the street in front of Chris's house, and one thing led to another, and Dean pulls out a gun and shoots what I can only call at Chris's son in my backyard, or Dean's backyard at the time, and I received a phone call about this. I wasn't here, obviously, because I wasn't living here. I was in Dallas, or I was at work, whatever it was. And I immediately just asked Chris not to go on the property because of the tensions that were there. And I came out and spoke with the lady that rented the house, and she had talked about what had happened, and she talked about walking through the backyard and picking up at least a shell casing that was shot, and maybe more. I'm not sure about the more, but there were shots fired, and they kind of covered that up a little bit, in my opinion, from what I was told. I was also told that Dean hurried out there and started a fight with Chris's son, and he was bragging pretty hard about how he had done that, and you know, tough guy and all. So in the days that followed all of this, I was concerned, and I had talked to Dean a couple of times because I didn't know really what Dean was capable of. One of the things that Dean told me as he was living here towards the later days was how he would take one of his weapons outside, and he would fire this thing off to intimidate the neighbors over their loud dogs or whatever. So the neighbors were pretty much scared of what Dean might do because of his actions while he lived in my home. And when he first moved here, because I didn't meet Dean before they moved in, because had I met Dean before they moved in, I would not have allowed Dean to live in my house. Dean has a daughter, and in the same video or audio that I listened to Dean speaking to the police, Dean talked about how he lost his daughter and kind of was making it seem like it wasn't his fault. But in my opinion, from what I saw, how Dean treated his daughter, she's better off with somebody else. Because the only time I talked to somebody the way Dean talked to his daughter was when I was trying to kick somebody's ass because they had done something to me that they shouldn't have. And that's the way he treated his daughter. And I saw that on more than one occasion. One of my friends that came to the house to help me move a certain item out of the house, and while I was there, Dean was talking to his daughter, and my friend told me, don't ever ask me to come back to that house because the way he treated his daughter, I will not stand for that. So, you know, when everybody walks around and talk about poor Dean, I do believe Dean started a good majority of, and continued on with a good majority of things that happened with Chris. Once the shooting occurred, I came out here just a little more regularly because I had no idea what Dean was going to do. I came out here one day, and Dean had cut the bottom branches off of my side of the cedar tree in the front yard. This is the cedar tree that Chris, all by himself, would decorate for Christmas every year. And Dean took it upon himself, because it hung over on his side of the property, to cut a tree that Chris and I kind of co-managed and co-owned throughout the years, and he destroyed this tree. And when I mentioned this to the lady that had rented the house, I told her, I said, if Dean continues to live at my house, I'm going to go to the authorities and I'm going to file a report, because what he did was he destroyed a multi-$1,000 tree, and you're either going to have a report on this or he's just going to leave and make it all go away. Well, he ended up moving out because he knew what he had done. Now, the following week, or it may have been 2 weeks, I'm not rightly sure, but Dean was out on his side of the property digging up the roots of this cedar tree after I had told him to leave the tree alone. He thought it was kind of funny that he was going to dig up the roots and kill the tree because he knew Chris liked the tree. And I don't know if he knew I'd like the tree as much as I did, but he was trying to kill the tree. There was another time that I came out to the property and he was putting yellow caution tape or do not cross or whatever tape that he was putting on the north side of my property between Chris's fence and the street. And I just asked him to take it down because it just wasn't appropriate, because in my opinion he was just starting fights with Chris. Another thing that he was doing, and I don't know why he told me this, but he said, yeah, and he was very proud of himself. He was very proud of himself because of what he was doing. I've been up on the house looking at Chris. I'm kind of getting back at him, and I can do this now. I can get up on the house and look at him. And I thought, man, stay off the top of the house. And ever since Dean moved into this, after finding out what kind of a person he is, I told him, I said, you need to leave the neighbors alone because you're not going to get along with the neighbors. He has an abrasive personality, and what he does and what he says was abrasive towards me just listening to him. And I used to spend about an hour every 2 or 3 weeks with him. I'd come out and they're friends, so I wanted to make sure everything was going along okay. And then we would have discussions about the dogs and things that he wanted to do or didn't want to do with the dogs, and dogs annoyed him. But they had a dog. They had an annoying dog too. So, and when they left my house, the house smelled like dog, and they didn't clean up after like they should have. And so, I mean, you can't really say a whole lot about folks when you're acting the same way that you're saying that they're acting, in my opinion. So, I've lived here since 2007, and I still live here. It's 2022 in December. And Chris and I, don't get me wrong, Chris and I have had a couple of issues that we've dealt with, one being the fence and the dogs, which we resolved amicably, and we, worked through the city to get that done. And Chris has a dog kennel in the back. He raises great dogs. People come by, and he works with great people that buy his animals. And I don't really have a problem with anything that's going on per se with him raising the dogs. Dean, on the other hand, what he was doing was kind of, and if I've got to look at this thing from the outside looking in, he was harassing Chris. And when I first talked to Dean about Chris, oh yeah, we're friends, man. Yeah, Chris and I are friends. But yet that never translated to, I'm treating Chris like a friend. It always translated to, I'm trying to get Chris to do something, or trying to get Chris not to do something, and he would get mad at Chris, and he would just act like he was trying to be controlling on the block. And I do know that after Dean moved out here, everybody had video cameras, and they were looking to see what Dean was doing, because I can't really say, because I don't know, and I didn't see for myself, but Dean was doing a lot of things on this block. Once he started having the issues with the neighbors, he started driving up and down the street. When he was working for the guy down the street, he started driving up and down the street, just like the other guy did down the street for 10 years that nobody did anything about in the police department. He'd drive by real loud in his truck going